Hello everyone, my name is ṭERBAN, founder of argumentative, and what you are about to witness is intellectual jousting and verbal dueling of the highest caliber. In front of you, four wonderful wordsmiths will debate whether teenagers should be trusted to set their own priorities. Agreeing with the topic will be ṭERBAN PITIC, with 14 years of debate training experience, and ANDREI OLARU, with 7 years of debating experience. Disagreeing with the topic will be David MOSCOVICI, with 15 years of debating experience, and OCTAVIAN NICA, with 5 years of debating experience. Gentlemen, I wish you good luck. May your arguments be witty, may your speech be structured, and be wary. Your opponents will try to derail you from the topic at hand with precise questions and aggressive remarks. Let there be debate.
Teenagers, they are, or have been, ever since society started to advance at the rate that relevant enough that there is a generational divide, there has been a question about them. Should society, and especially the ones that are closer to them, their parents, maybe their teachers, actually trust them in setting their own priorities, making their own decisions about the things that are truly relevant, about their education, about their future place of living, about their future area of employment, about their love life, about their friends, who do they spend time with. Should they be trusted to take these decisions? And me and ṭERBAN today, we stand firmly on the side that believes that, yes, we should trust them. There are a number of reasons for that. The first reason is because chances are that they know better than anybody else, for two main reasons. First of all, because they know themselves. Sometimes they may not be able to put it in words, and they might not be able, when you ask them, how are you, what are your characteristics, they might not be able to pinpoint them, but they intuitively know themselves, just like any one of us knows themselves as much as possible. And especially if we tell them that we trust them to take their own decisions, to set their own priorities, they will investigate more. Who are they actually? And try to learn who they are and get a better understanding through introspection. Second of all, they probably know best because they have an intuitive understanding of the world that will be a world made up primarily or created by their generation. They have a better understanding of their own generation than their parents or their teachers, just like in a second, David, just like we have a better understanding of our generation, our parents had a better understanding of their generation. Each generation intuitively knows the intrinsic and secret rules that govern its functioning. Yes, David.
Who are these teenagers that at 15 know themselves? Because most people, by the time they're 25, severely hate who they used to be at 15, superficial and clueless. What teenagers are you exactly talking about?
I never said that they know themselves. I just said that they understand themselves better than others or anybody else, honestly. They, as I said, may not know exactly how they will be at 25, but if people around them actually push them towards introspection, chances are that they will intuitively get to better conclusions than other people, because as little as they know about themselves, everybody else just knows less. And this brings me kind of to the second point, because it's not only about whether they will actually manage to take the best decisions, because let's be honest, everyone makes mistakes. But the question is, how do we truly create an environment around teenagers in which they, first of all, get a sense of responsibility for their own actions and their own lives, and secondarily, a world, an environment in which they get to trust maybe the advice of others around them and integrate them organically into their decision making. And the only way for us to create that environment is if we create an environment of trust in which they feel that they are trusted, in which they feel that their opinion matters, is important, and not as a subsidiary, not as something that shall be taken in consideration, but more rather as crucial, as the central element that is deciding for their own lives. And this is the only way in which you can get a teenager to trust their parents, especially at that age, if they feel that their parents trust them back. And by creating this environment of trust, you also create an environment in which there's a better chance of teenagers actually assuming responsibility and growing, having a growth of responsibility inside of them. The third reason for this is that it is important for teenagers to establish a good straight-up relationship with the important people around them, be it teachers, parents, friends. And there is nothing that can ruin a relationship more than feeling that you were pressured when you were 16 into choosing a life path, and now you're 30, and you kind of hate that life path, and you feel bitter towards your parents because they pushed you towards that. That's the kind of thing that might severely limit their ability to create a strong emotional bond with some people that might be very important and crucial for their mental health and life and happiness later on. Yes, David?
Of course, it's beautiful for there to be mutual trust constructed. I think the question of today's debate and what's worth debating is whether this trust should be presumed or should the teenager earn it, gain it from their parents?
Yes, I agree. And I think that to a certain extent it should be presumed. Because in here, what we are debating is not whether teenagers are capable of constructing clear-cut arguments and descriptions of the reasons for which they make their choices, because as cool and awesome as debate is in giving people these kind of tools, not everyone is a natural when it comes to describing what's in their heart and minds. But this doesn't mean that what's in their heart and minds is not relevant, to the point, or true, or correct. And thus, I don't think that the test should be, can a teenager convince somebody that what they're doing is right? But more rather, people should have to convince them of choosing a different path. And if they're not convinced, it might be for a good reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, of course, building trust is the objective. I think both teams can agree to that. The ideal is mutually constructed trust. I think the core question to whether we should trust teenagers to set their own priorities comes down to the fundamental question of whose final decision it should be. While both sides can agree there should be significant input from both sides. Ultimately, the teenager is not, we're not discussing young adults, we're discussing teenagers here. We're discussing people who are legally classified as minors. We are discussing people who are looked upon as specialists, as people whose neurology is still forming. We're discussing people whose hormones and emotions are at the peak of their lives. People who are easily and heavily influenced by small events, by peer pressure. And we today are saying that that trust in teenagers is not something that should be automatically given, freely given to anything and everything a teenager desires, wants to set as a priority. And we're saying that us as a society should not trust teenagers until they prove worthy of trust. Which is to say,
David.
not yet, which is to say, we should set curriculums for them in schools, right? That's the very reason why we have them go through, do some math, do some drawing, do some physical education. Even if you think your priority is to sit at home and play your game all day, even if you think you should run and do sports exclusively, whichever you as a teenager think is a good priority, we're saying no, society, through teachers, school curriculums, parental input, overall, needs to intervene and say no. It might be possible that a teenager should highly focus on their sports career, but they need to give evidence of that, show they know what they're doing, show they're not going in an emotionally bad place by doing so, show that they can keep up with their intellectual development as they engage in sports, show that they can be successful in sports, that this is something valuable for their future.
David.
All of these evidences need to be brought in practice by a teenager before we should trust them. Go ahead.
Should we trust our adult friends and close ones as a presumption to make choices about their priorities?
I'm not rightly sure. I think that might be something they need to earn too. Like if you really love your friends, I don't think you should trust them unconditionally. I think you need for them to show that, look, they make good decisions in field X. And once they've proven that, yeah, support them forward with that decision, much like a teenager. But it's so much more important for teenagers. That's our point today, that they are a vulnerable group, that they are a group highly targeted and pressured by external pressures today. Social media massively tells them how to be, what to consume, what to buy. You have addiction formulated games that draw them in and want to pull them 12 hours a day into the cycles of dopamine these games can offer. We have social groups, we have extremist groups that tug on teenagers and recruit teenagers from the far left to the far right, massively recruiting vulnerable teenagers. These are the same teenagers that, after having a bad experience with math in the 5th grade, will completely forsake math and decide math is not for them, when what you might have had there was there a parent to say, look, you need to give math a few more chances, or a curricula that says, look, you still need to try some math in the 9th grade, might discover a future programmer there that just happened to have a bad experience in the 5th grade. No, thank you. We think setting kids with these is the specific difference between a young adult and a teenager, and that is why we look at it as a distinct category. It's a category who we should listen to, who can earn trust, but shouldn't be trusted by default when they decide writing Twilight fan fiction is their priority and that's what they want to do, or hopeless pursuit of a Fortnite competitive career, right? Because the vast majority of kids engaging with those things do not end up millionaires, just end up saying at 25, oh my God, look at the hundreds of hours I wasted on that dumb thing back when I was 16. We want to help them prevent this sort of thing and have them show us that something is valuable. It's fine if they engage with something and discover a priority and show their parents, look, I'm good at this. This has value for my future. Please let me do it. Go ahead.
So your assumption is that we should trust ourselves as parents to set the priorities of teenagers, or should we doubt our own choices as well?
Fallibility is certainly across the board. We believe that both parents and children are capable of failure. We're just saying that children are highly emotionally volatile, have a very limited experience of life. They have no understanding of the job market and of all the tricks and all the unfairness that is out there, and which is why we think parents should have this final call in which it is the kid that has to show that they are capable of choosing a priority. Which gets me to my second point, a very important point, which is that this pursuit of gaining trust is in itself a highly formative experience, right? If you're a kid who simply, whatever you want to do, that's what you do, your parents trust you, if you think that's what's good, that's what they'll do, they might comment on it, but you do what you want to do, that deprives you of an essential character building experience. The experience of showing you can pursue something, of getting an achievement, of building all of that. We're saying that that's what life is like, right? You're going to have to convince your bosses. You're going to have to convince your partners. You're going to have to show your value, not simply choose it as a priority and know you're good. You have to be able to validate that with others. And the first people you ever validate that with is your parents. It's fine to pursue priorities, to have priorities. but they need to be validated with a parent, which is why a parent needs to be a final arbiter. Even when the parent is wrong, right? Even when the parent doesn't realize it's a great idea to engage with the internet a lot, it is up to you, and it is part of your formation to be able to show that value to the parent, and we think that's valuable. We're, of course, in no way defending parents that want to fully control their kids' lives or decide for them what they should do, but essentially, to the fundamental question of is trust to be given or is it to be earned, we're saying trust needs to be earned. And we're saying that's what makes the best teenagers, the teenagers that actually show they need to prove evidence, they actually need to have value they can show somebody else, and that is what earns them the freedom to pursue what they like. And we believe that will make for less slackers, less social media manipulated and pressured teens, and better adults when we're said and done with it.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack some of the clarifications that need to be made in this debate, and I'm also going to unpack some of the false assumptions made by David in his speech. So firstly, let's clarify, right? We're not debating whether trust in general should be earned or not, because of course it should. I'm not going to trust a random person on the street before I know them, that they care about me. I'm not going to trust a friend that they care about me. Oftentimes, the rhetoric used by David would suggest that, well, it's natural to earn trust. Yes, it is. But it's natural to earn trust in terms of, do you actually want something good for me? So when it's a matter of relationships, yes, trust must be earned. But when it's a matter of individuals knowing what is their priority, this is the specific question of this debate, right? We don't even need to trust teenagers that they are very good at doing things, right? We might think that, well, they need to learn and that they're going to have hardship. But we should trust them as a presumption that they understand what they want and that they understand what will make them happy. Because this oftentimes is a matter of instinct. And we need to trust them that they will choose better for themselves, even if they fail, right? Because in life, oftentimes, you need to go through the process of failing and understanding why you failed. And this means that you will grow in a healthy way. If you have never tried, you will live with the regret. Not only that, but you might fail anyway, even if you've taken the safer choice imposed by your parents. But of course, clearly, just to be clear here, the debate is not about whether trust should be earned sometimes, but whether we should presume trust that teenagers know what's best for them, and clearly that we should. Because, look, here's the other assumption that David makes, is that somehow, if we don't trust them, we can push them in the right direction. This lays on two absolutely faulty assumptions. I'll take you in a second. First faulty assumption is that we will succeed even if we know what's best for them, that we will succeed in persuading them. Oftentimes, not trusting a teenager will lead to that teenager rebelling against the parent, will lead to the teenager ultimately still doing the things that they want to do, but at the same time doing them in a way that doesn't involve conversations with the parent, that doesn't involve guidance from the parent, that doesn't involve guidance from the teacher. So when we don't trust them, we have less control over how they will actually implement in most practical situations. The other faulty assumption, I'll take you right after this, is that somehow we have the ability to determine what's best for them. What is best? What makes them most money in life? What is best? What gives them the safest life? What is best? What gives them the most exciting life? Isn't this ultimately a question for each and every one of us? We are different and we have different preferences, not the same preferences our parents have. What makes the parent able to decide what the priority is?
You're speaking as if the opposite of trust is automatically distrust and a negative interaction, but that's not true. There's also a gray area down there, and this is what we are proposing. We're not saying we shouldn't listen to your kids or you shouldn't guide them. We are saying we should be open to discussion but have the final word.
Okay, so ultimately we're also not saying you can't guide your kids and you can't have discussions with them. But what we're saying is that when you don't trust them and you show them that you don't trust them, they will hide from you. You will not be able to have those conversations. But also that when you won't trust them, you will do whatever you can to make them take the right decision. That means you will push them. Even if you love them, even if you want their best, because you don't trust them ultimately, you will push them. And we've seen this happen time and time again. We've seen this happening with generations, right? Generations of people that have done what their parents have told them to do. My father was a lawyer, so I'm going to be a lawyer. Living miserable lives, right, because of this. We see that people are happiest when they make their own choices and when they make their own mistakes. They are most content when they make their own mistakes. We won't allow children to make their own mistakes in this world. Or even if we allow them, we will allow them to make their own mistakes by them rebelling against us, by going against us, and feeling that they were never trusted by their parents. The feeling of lack of trust creates significant emotional trauma, right? So even if the parents and teachers don't really influence my life course, but they've only just shown me, given me the feeling that I'm not trusted throughout my life. Just that alone creates emotional trauma and makes me feel like I'm not trustworthy or that I'm not trusted, or makes me, in my turn, not trust my spouse, not trust my own children, not trust my friends. This is a problem because this creates a life that is less filled with satisfaction and also makes of me less of an enjoyable person to be around. And we think that for that alone, we should actually attempt to trust our children to the fullest extent possible. But ultimately, we need to understand that it's about trusting children of their own priorities. Ultimately, what it means, not children, sorry, teenagers, right? Ultimately, what it means, and this is actually true for children as well. That's the reason I said children. It's true of children, it's true of teenagers, it's true of adults. You need to trust people that they know what they want. Because what they want is intrinsic to them and is specific to them. That doesn't mean that you think that they are good at everything that they're going to do. And you can still help them out if you think that they're not going to be that good, right? Look, so David said something that's really funny. He said that, oh, that's why we establish curricula and we force kids to go to school, because we don't trust them. And that's a disaster, isn't it? Schools kill creativity. Kids hate school, and we see this in countries all around the world, that the school process is exceptionally ineffective because it's based on the assumption that you have to, not on the assumption that you want to be there. So, sorry, but industrial style schooling has failed, and it's failed because it's not based on trust. That's why the parenting of the 20th century has failed, because it wasn't based on trust. We need to move to an approach where we trust our youth.
Look, trust has two sides, and we need to discuss both in today's debate. First of all, it has a moral side. Basically, the idea that people are trustworthy. And we need to make sure that teenagers are trustworthy when they make decisions. And obviously, I'm not saying that all teenagers are horrible and they can't make decisions. What we are saying is that this is a psychological trait that you learn. As David was pointing out earlier, we are not born with the social skills innately to function in society as we do from one day to another. And we live in social constructs and in social institutions that require certain skills that we are not born with, like being in a job, having a family, and so on and so forth. And many times, parents are the best mechanisms for you to learn these things. And learning how to make them trust you for your own priorities, for your own life, is a great way for you to prepare for life. So that's the first thing. But more than that, we believe that also this kind of, let's say, in a second, ÞERBAN.
Sure.
Not now, in a second.
Okay.
So, but apart from this whole idea that if you are a teenager, you need to rebel, you need to be transgressive, and so on and so forth. Again, we totally agree with that. You should be like that as a teenager. But in order, because this is how you learn how to make counter arguments. This is how you learn to put your point forward, and so on and so forth. It's really important for you to develop a clear sense of morality in life. But in order for you to be able to do that, you need to be able to rebel. If we trust you with everything, if you trust, we take you for granted, and if you take your decisions that are important for your life, you'll have no space for rebelling. So actually, what we are saying is that it's better for you as a kid to have a parent, to have a mentor that's actually not trusting you at the beginning, because you need to earn that. And your act of rebellion against your parents is that thing that will make you learn in the future. Now, ÞERBAN.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say something else, but now I'm going to say, like, so are you saying that it would be best that we would live in an oppressive dictatorship, that we learn to fight for our rights? Like, that's absurd. The harm is much greater when you are oppressed as a teenager.
Come on, this is just a straw man. I'm not saying we are going to turn our life in a miniature version of Belarus. We're just saying we're going to have constructive interactions with our parents as teenagers, and we let them, we'll have to make our teenagers learn what we like and how to like in order to adapt to social situations. There is a lot of gray area between, I don't know, a libertarian paradise and a dictatorship as you're speaking right now. But this is the first part of trust, the idea of trustworthiness, let's say the moral side of trust. There is another aspect to it that we believe it's even more relevant in this debate, the practical side to it. Are teenagers able to take the right decisions? And ÞERBAN was speaking earlier about the fact that nobody knows what the right decisions are. Everyone has different goals and so on and so forth. And yeah, obviously it's true, but it's meaningless. Because if this would be true about any individual, that they have very distinctive preferences, then we wouldn't trust anyone, be them 30 or 40 or 20 or 10 years old. But the point is not to just state these platitudes, but actually look at how teenagers function, how they look like, what information they have when they make decisions. And this is where the actual debate lies, I think. Because first of all, we believe that teenagers lack a lot of knowledge based on which they can take decisions for the future. First of all, they lack...
Please.
No, thank you. They lack a lot of knowledge about how their life will look like in the future, about what jobs they have, and so on and so forth. Because, and I mean, let's be honest, how many of us haven't had massive changes of perspective about what a job means and what the job that they have right now is, and so on and so forth? Obviously, we had, because all the information about, or most of the information that we have about our careers, our jobs, and so on and so forth, is very unstructured information. Information that is, no, thank you. Does not reside in places of formal or, let's say, scientific knowledge that kids can get it from. So they need to speak to others, and they need to get information from others in order to take rational decisions for the future. That's why we need parents and elders to help them in this and guide them. And that's why you don't have to fully trust them at the beginning, because we can't rationally make these decisions as teenagers. Moreover, teenagers are are unexperienced, no thank you, actually in a second, are unexperienced in engaging in long-term relationships. They don't have these abilities because they've not been in long-term relationships. Oh, again, we don't have to fully trust them when they make decisions about who their friends or who they interact with in the long run, because they don't have the information to make this kind of decisions. Yes, sir.
Yes, it's true that teenagers lack some information. But as opposed to a 50 or a 40-year-old parent or teacher, they're open-minded and they don't have so many biases. Oftentimes, the decision you think is right for the teenager is based on biases and fixed ideas that you have in your mind. They don't have that preconception.
First of all, I think teenagers are, again, socialized in our society, and they still have biases. I mean, there are a lot of teenagers that are racist or they have a lot of prejudices because they take them from society. So that's the first. So I think this is a thing that we shouldn't generalize here. Second of all, you are playing this entire debate on the assumption that the only guidance that comes towards children comes from the parents. And I think, again, I think this is an issue in our society, but it shouldn't be so. I think we shouldn't trust children, but the tutoring process should be as open and as inclusive as possible, and they should get information from more and more people. This doesn't happen in society. And as you said earlier, sort of industrial education is failing in this side. But this does not fail because we don't or we trust kids so much. It's just because we don't get the right types of information to them. So in order to finish this, my speech, I would say one thing. Psychologically, kids are not fully developed. They don't have the grit to face reality, to face the real world, because they didn't have time to develop that. And many of the things that they need to do in society, many of the things they need to learn, require this kind of grit. Maybe, I know, I hated mathematics when I was 7 or 8 because it just said you had to work for it. And what was the point? Now I like it. I went to like 3 or 4 years of pain in learning it, but it was really, really useful, and I really like doing what I do now because of mathematics. Most of the kids don't have the ability to see in the future because they can't comprehend the future. They don't have the skills. So at the end of the day, I believe we can't fully trust them because they don't have the moral and the practical ability to take decisions regarding their life. Thank you.
Now, a thing we debaters do is sometimes we frame a topic through cherry-picking examples, right? And I want to do comparisons of all the fair levels that it's fair to do. Let's take the worst teenager and the worst parent, right? The teenager that's en route to becoming a drug addict, aimless, and about to ruin their whole lives because of the decisions they make as a teenager, paired with the worst parent, the one who narrow-mindedly thinks their kid should only become a lawyer and anything else is wrong. We think in this bad scenario that our angle is better. It won't be a great family life, and it won't be a great kid, but we think that kid pressured by that parent towards misguidedly something specific other than a life of destruction is still better than if he fully trusted the teenager to ruin his own life. Let's take the great kid and the great parent, right? The kid who really knows what's going on, who's super mature, has a great grasp of things, and the parent's also great. They understand modern times, future priorities, and are capable of building rapport. In this case, we think, again, it's perfectly fine to take our model, and the teenager will successfully, over time, through evidence that they know what they're doing, gain that parent trust. So in that case, we believe you should go with our side as well. But most importantly, let's look at what matters, which is the average teenager and the average parent, right? What are they like? The average teenager is bombarded with priorities other people want from him, right? Peer pressure that comes from people trying to use teenagers, be they companies that want them to make consumers of them, to make them buy a certain product, whether it's fashion or games or where it may be. People looking to manipulate them and grooming them for recruitment towards political priorities or social groups, not to talk of harsher things. These teenagers do have a better grasp of their parents of what's modern, true, but also have zero context for that understanding. They understand it consumer side. They understand what it's like to be a consumer of modern things. They don't know what it's like to be in a job, to be an employer, to be an employee, to have to pay for your own things, to have to contextualize life, to form these priorities and how they ripple off into your future. And the parent does have some misguided ideas. The average parent, right, does have lacking understanding of what the kid might exactly be going through emotionally or socially, but does have this context of life and what might be following. Now, in this average scenario, we're saying that it's essential for them to be able to apply this test. The first, you need to successfully demonstrate that something is a valuable priority before I sign off on it. That's what we're saying is the question of today's debate. Not automatically trusting them to set all of their priorities, making sure that they demonstrate those priorities are valuables. We make propositions, they might take them, they might not. Not to set their priorities for them, but to always have them earn that trust, not automatically have it. We're saying that lots of kids with lots of potential can be ruined by trusting, by not being given the formative experience of persuading somebody in charge like they will all their lives, whether it's their boss, their spouse, everybody in the future, their friends. It will be all about convincing others that something is valuable and that what you have is valuable and what you want to do is worth doing. And we think that should begin in the household, because lots of kids who are not given this guidance, who are fully allowed to do anything and everything, often find themselves lost at 25, wondering why they wasted all that time when they were 15. And they might not blame their parents explicitly, but a parent that would have engaged with the child to say, look, you need to demonstrate to me some valuable priorities for your life so you may engage with them, we think is the best parenting model right now. Thank you.
David started from this assumption that there are people that are kind of average teenagers, horrible teenagers, good, super successful teenagers, and these people just pop into existence out of nowhere in a standard distribution model, which is completely the opposite of what happens. You don't get born an average teenager. You are being constructed by your parents into an average teenager. You don't get born a drug addict teenager. You're constructed by your parents into a drug addict teenager. Do you know what type of parent has the biggest chance of constructing a drug addict teenager? A parent that keeps on telling his teenager that might be passionate about, I don't know, cars or video games or whatever, that they really need to become a lawyer. And a teenager that feels that level of oppression, that wants to escape that level of oppression every day, that's the type of teenager that gets to become a drug addict. To a certain extent, David wants to make this debate about the question, who knows best, telling us how teenagers are bombarded from all directions by all sorts of people that try to pull them into making all sorts of decisions, and how only the valiant parents that really know so much better are the ones that will guide them on the right path, which is so absurd. Like, we don't know how parents are. Parents in many moments are just as bombarded by demands and biases and consumer and companies trying to push them towards pushing their children in all sorts of directions. So this is in so many ways a moot point in this conversation. Do you know what's the question? The question is, how will these people, these teenagers, get the best lives? And honestly, the only argument that David and Okti are offering is this idea that they get the best lives if they get used to seeking approval. You know, because in life you so totally always need to seek approval from other people. So let's just build up some argumentational skills so that they know how to seek approval. We say that that's horrible. We don't want a society of people seeking approval from other people. We don't want a society of people that cower in oppression and the having to obey the beliefs and biases of other people. How you get teenagers that take the best decisions for themselves and not for somebody else is if they learn to do that. If they learn how to take the decisions, not how to seek approval for some ideas. If they learn how to decide themselves, is this a good idea or not, and not just to learn how can I argue this best to my mom, and then my mom takes this decision for me. We want, honestly, the best way in which you can get people that are most in sync with what's inside of them is if they figure out what's inside of them and not how to convolutely describe what's inside of them to their parents. It really doesn't matter whether you're capable of convincing your mom and dad with their biases and that are stressed and have their own jobs and beliefs, whether what's best for you is to start doing pottery. The question is, do you really like doing pottery? And if you do, maybe you should do pottery. And you deciding yourself, am I good at pottery? Is this fun enough? How am I seeing myself? You asking these questions yourself and not having to convince your parents for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherban. Thank you, Dexter. Thank you, David. Thank you, Okti. Thank you for your words, your ideas, and your speeches, and your energy. The debate is done. You may cross floors and, well, touch elbows, but the discussion remains unfinished.
Good job.
Good job.